This weekend, the Northumberland Public Library is hosting an artist studio tour, and my workshop's on the tour. So people are going to be coming in all weekend, and I'll get to show them all the things I do. Now you're witnessing a rare event. I've cleaned up my workshop. It won't be this clean for at least another year. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to give you a little tour of the workshop. From the deck of my workshop, you can see my sawmill. It's under cover over there. It's a small Wood-Mizer LT15, and it works good. And my solar kiln for drying my lumber. And of course our house. It's an easy commute. Pickup truck, you always need that. And of course on the deck I have a couple of easy chairs because every once in a while I get tired of standing and I want to walk outside here and just sit. So let's go ahead on inside the shop. First room to greet you I call the bench room. It's got my workbench, which I made back in 1980. It's ash, and it's lasted me very well. And of course in this room I get to hang up all my Navy mementos that I collected over the years. And of course some of my tools, clamps. And for this particular weekend I'm going to be showing off some of my work, so I've also displayed a few of my pieces that I have available in here. Okay, so let's start looking here in the shop. Now over here I've got the drum sander. It's Performax drum sander. It works very well for flattening out pieces of wood for bent laminations, hooked up to dust collection. Later on I'll show you the dust collector in the basement. Here I've got a compound miter saw. Very nice, very accurate for cutting off large pieces, and I also can do very exacting trim work on that as well. And of course it's got a dust collection hood behind it as well. Here's the jewel of the shop. It's this little Makita 2040 planer. It's not made anymore, unfortunately. It's a little over 15 inches wide, 2 blades, and it cuts just very, very smoothly. Very nice tool. Over here I've got the Unisaw, which I've had for a number of years. Good saw, but I always like to have 2 table saws for various setups. So over here I've got a SawStop, which I can highly recommend. It's a very good quality saw, plus it's got the safety features where the blade will stop if your finger contacts the blade. Over in the corner I've got my sharpening area, a grinder. I've got a Tormek water-cooled grinder, and then a lot of different sharpening stones, both Japanese water stones and conventional oil type stones for sharpening my various blades and gouges. For sharpening my planer knives and jointer knives I've got a stationary knife sharpener. Works fairly nicely, but is kind of time intensive if you decide you want to do that. For my very wide lumber I've got a 20-inch Grizzly planer. Of course, you know, I cut down, mill my own lumber, so I end up with wide planks, and that's why I need such a large machine. Here's a 14-inch bandsaw. It's the Rockwell model, but same as what's called Delta today, I believe. And I've got the riser block in it, and so it'll actually resaw 12 inches. It does a very nice job. Typically I use a 1/2 inch wide 3-tooth per inch skip tooth blade. I've got a bunch of them over here. And I've tried all kinds of blades, and I finally settled on the regular old carbon steel blade. Cost about $8 each. They work very well, and I'm told they can be resharpened. I haven't actually tried that myself, but I know that that's possible. Over here is a shaper. I don't use a shaper too much, but I think you may have seen in one of my videos of doing a tabletop bevel. I use the shaper to put a 60-degree bevel on there, so when you have to have a shaper, it's nice to have one. Now, this is a very nice handy tool. It's a belt sander oscillating so that the belt oscillates up and down as well as running horizontally. It's for edge sanding. Very useful tool. My very first tool that I bought, it's a Craftsman radial arm saw, 10-inch. Not a whole lot of power in this thing, but I've been using it now since 1976, and it still holds up just great. Just got to be slow with the cutting. My newest tool is a Denray downdraft table for sanding. I found that hand sanding made more dust than any other operation in the shop. So I was at the International Woodworking Machinery Fair last summer, and I talked with the folks out at Denray, and I went ahead and ordered the tool, and I don't regret it. It's a great tool, keeps the dust down. This particular tool is a Shopsmith. It's a 10ER, model 10ER from 1950, I believe, or maybe 51. It was an anniversary present from my mother to my father, and of course now I have it, and it's a very useful tool. I use it mostly for a drill press, but it will fold down so you can have a horizontal boring machine, and if you need to, you can turn it into a lathe or various other tools. Of course, I've got most of the various other tools as separate tools, so I don't need to do that, so I use it as a drill press mostly. Okay, walking on down through the shop, I think I've covered all the major tools. Oh, I forgot one. My first joiner, an 8-inch joiner, Powermatic. You gotta have a joiner. I've actually got another one down below that I'll show you. It's a 16-inch. But this 8-inch joiner, I use it all the time. I've been using it, had this tool since 1982. Moving down through the shop, of course, clamps. You can never have enough clamps, and as many as I have, and I have a lot, it's not enough sometimes. Here's another one of my newest tools. It's a Southworth kind of a forklift. It's called a dandy lift, and it's low enough that it'll slip under my furniture pieces, and then using a foot pump I can raise the forks up to a couple of feet high, and that allows me to pick up some of the large pieces of furniture and move them over to the loading door, where I can then pick them up with a tractor and move them out of the shop. So a real back saver. In my workshop, I do my own photography. It's kind of a necessity in my case. I live in a rather remote area, and it would be very difficult to move my furniture to a professional photography studio, and so I've learned to do it myself. I have 3 backdrop papers that hang from the ceiling. There are rolls, they're about 9 feet wide, and I'll roll down a backdrop paper onto the floor and then put the piece of furniture on the paper. Go ahead and put shades on the windows. Go ahead and bring out the lights. I have light boxes to distribute the light evenly. They're on stands. And then my tripod and camera, and shoot away. And so far it's worked fairly well. I've been able to use these photographs for show entries and contest, award entries, and you can see some of the photography up there. I post some of it, and books, magazines, and so it's doable. Just takes some patience, but it works out well. Now we're going to go on down into my office and finishing room area. I've got my computer and printer. I've also got a photographic printer in there for my photographs. And I do my finishing in here. I use shellac and wipe-on varnishes and that sort of thing, oils, so I don't spray. So I can, I can store my finishing material in my flammable locker, and then set up on my little finishing table here and do the work. I've also got my beer bottle collection. I started collecting these back in about 1994 when I was in the Navy and I was overseas, and I just kept at it. And so I've got hundreds of beer bottles, and I have to keep making new shelves because they keep making new beer. All right. Now, I also have my bookshelves in here where I keep, all my magazines and books and so forth, my professional collection. And here's an important thing, moving blankets. I went ahead and bought a dozen of these a few years ago, and they come in very handy for doing shows. Now in this room, this is what I call my ready storage locker for lumber. I've got racks on the walls with a good sampling of various species, mostly lumber that I mill myself and dry myself. And I also store, odds and ends in here. There's my camera tripod, and behind the door I've got my photographic lights. It's a good storeroom for that. And I've got double doors here that open up into the back where I can take my tractor with its forks, and you'll see that in a minute, and bring my heavy furniture out here, and then right straight through the door I can lift it up and out of the workshop. Okay, well, let's go ahead on down and take a look down into the basement. Before we go downstairs, one of the things actually a couple of things I failed to point out, is that when you build furniture you often have to make jigs and forms for making the various parts. So I always save all those jigs and forms, and I hang them on the wall because you'll never know when you're going to need to use them again. The other thing I didn't mention is dust is a real concern when you're making furniture, and so besides having an installed dust collection system, and I'll show you the cyclone separator in a minute, but I've got two dust collectors in the overhead, and when I'm doing particularly dusty operations I'll run those. The only problem is they capture the dust after it's already in the air, so in that case I also wear one of these little dust masks to keep the dust out. And speaking of dust, and not to plug too hard, but I think Festool makes great tools, and they all take great dust collection. They all have great dust collection ability. There I've got the little vacuum cleaner. It's called a dust extractor, I believe is the name of it, but it's a vacuum cleaner. And I've got a couple of tools there in those boxes. Festool tools for making domino joints and for sanding that'll hook in there, and also the other tools that I have that are not Festool will also hook into the dust collection, and that way I'm able to collect the dust at the source. And finally, the other thing you need to have in a workshop, it's really important to get a good one, is a vacuum cleaner. Sounds pretty simple, but there's all kinds of vacuum cleaners, and so I've got a Bosch model here. It's got a really good filter system, and so when it sucks up the dust, it doesn't put dust back out into the air. This is my basement. It's the same footprint as the workshop. As a matter of fact, I didn't mention it, but I actually built this workshop myself, literally myself. It took me a couple years to do, but I'm glad I did it. It was a great learning experience. And so anyway, the basement has the same footprint as the upstairs, so we're in one of the long garage bays right now. It's 40 feet long, and in here I can store wood. There's some cherry crotch. I've got my dust collection cyclone here, which if you decide to do one of these, I built that myself using advice and plans on Bill Pence dust collection website. Very good website to go to. Just Google Bill Pence, and you'll find that. And of course I store lumber down here. I'll show you more of that in a minute, but here's my really nice 16-inch jointer. It's a Grizzly. It's industrial quality, very good, very heavy. This jointer weighs about 1,700 pounds, and it was all I could do with my tractor to pick it up and get it into the shop here. But I'm glad I've got it. It's a really high quality machine. I recommend it to anyone. And of course I've got the dust collection ducting all through the overhead. They cut up through the floor when necessary to go to the various machines so that I can keep the dust down in the workshop. Now here's some of my wood storage. I'm now storing my wood vertically. I used to store it horizontally, and I found that I couldn't get to the boards, So a couple years ago I went ahead and bit the bullet and just moved everything out of the shop and made these A-frame storage racks. It's a little hard to see how they work there, but I think maybe you can kind of get the idea. It's just a simple 2x4 A-frame. You got wood leaning up on both sides. So I've got some cherry here, some walnut, various woods, holly, pretty much anything that grows around this neck of the woods here in Virginia that comes down in storms, or if someone has to take a tree down for some reason, I will, if they call me and ask me to take it, I'll come over and get the tree, and then I'll mill it up into lumber. And of course this comes from the styrofoam tree and a few other things, a plywood tree. And we'll just make our way down to the other end of the shop. So I've got a lot of wood stored here. There's a dehumidifier. I keep the space down here climate controlled so that the wood stays at a humidity level similar to what you'd have in your home. And if I catch the whole place here, you can see there's quite a bit of lumber down here. Now we're in the other bay, the opposite end of the shop, and here's a tool that is really necessary in this business. It's a tractor. I mostly use this, to tell you the truth, for just maintaining the property. I've got a long entrance road down here to the shop that I have to maintain, but this does come in handy. I got forklifts on there now that I can use to pick up stacks of lumber, and great and a lot of fun too. Over here I've got another A-frame that I set up for plywood, so that if occasionally I'll do plywood work. I'm not a real plywood specialist, but like I say, every once in a while I'll need some plywood for a piece, and so I've got some on hand. And over here I store all my show materials, my booth setup, and so forth. Okay, we'll go ahead on upstairs now. Well, I hope you enjoyed this opportunity to see my workshop in its clean state, this once-a-year event. And I hope I didn't sound like I was tooting my own horn too much, but I really do like this workshop. And if you have any questions about how to set up a workshop, anything like that, feel free to email me. My contact is on andrewpittsfurnituremaker.com. Thank you.